What is up, you guys? My name is Amanda and welcome back to another episode of Chasing Leadville 100. Today we are going to go through 8 tips that I wish that I knew as a new runner. The last one is delicious, so make sure to stick around for the entire thing. So let's jump right in. These are the 8 things that I wish that I knew as a new runner. The first thing is that intention matters. I want to go back to the very beginning of my running journey to kind of explain some things where I feel like I went wrong and the things that I've learned through this process of getting better at running. My first race that I ever actually raced in was when I was, I want to say a junior in college. And at the time I was really struggling, maybe it was even younger, I think it was sophomore in college. I was really struggling with an eating disorder, and at the time it was like manifesting in so many different ways, and I had moved out of my house when I was 16 years old, and that's kind of when all of that stuff started, was just like the lack of control in the rest of my life manifested in me taking like extreme control over the foods that I was eating. And I remember when I was a personal trainer at the gym that I was working, which I worked at through college, I kind of decided one day that I was gonna do my cardio on the treadmill. I started running and I realized how big of an escape it was for me in my brain. And I think in the back of my mind, I also thought about obviously the control over the calorie burn that I could have by incorporating that into my fitness journey. When I look back and I think about Amanda as like the very beginner runner that she was, I think about it in a really sad light because I remember kind of obsessing over the numbers of like how many miles I was running a day and looking at the calorie count on the treadmill and like super hyper analyzing the numbers when it came to running. So what started as something that felt like an escape for me became something that imprisoned me. And there's a sermon that I listen to and I think about this all the time it was actually from Pastor Stephen Furtick from Elevation Church, and he said that the very thing that we escape to as humans becomes the very thing that traps us and imprisons us and keeps us hostage. So all these things that we think that are gonna provide us peace and safety just really end up being a detriment to our overall safety in the end. So that was Amanda as a very beginner runner. I would say my intermediate phase of running started when I was in the military. So after I graduated from college, I joined the Army, and if you've ever known anything about the Army ever, you know that the Army loves to run. It's something that they incorporate into all training, schools, everything. Like everything is based on your efficiency as a runner and as an athlete. So we had strength tests, but also we had endurance tests, and the endurance tests were done through running. I remember in my first test in the Army, me not getting 100% on the male scale of the PT test portion that was for running. And I remember crossing the 2-mile finish line, quote unquote, and feeling like I had really let myself down. So after I kind of let myself down in that regard, I really took it upon myself to be a really stellar runner. I never held myself to the female standards in the military. I always wanted to match the male standards because for me, being female or male didn't really matter when it came to being in the military, because we're all providing a service and like giving up our lives, and that affects other people's safety. So for me, I took it really seriously. I started running to become a better runner. So it was truly when my brain swapped from, hey, I am running for this like control factor, to hey, I'm running for survival and for success in the military. And I always thought about this. I had several different mentors in my military career that just reminded me that when you're in the military and you're on a team, if you are the weakest link, you are the highest safety risk. So I never wanted to be the highest safety risk. So if I could improve my running, then that would make me more of an asset in the military. I would say I was more in the intermediate phase of running when I was in the military for my entire career. I never really got that much better. I never really got that much worse. I believe my best 2-mile time in the military was a 12-minute 2-mile, so a 6-minute mile for 2 miles, which obviously sounds fast, but in the military, that's still, it's 100%. And I just kind of like plateaued there, and I never really knew like the components of what would make you a really successful runner. I didn't really care about that. All I cared about was performing well in the schools that I was going to and in that test. So that brings us to now, and obviously now I'm in a much different place with running. It is purely based on the fact that, for one, I love running, and it's something that I utilize to share what I feel like are my gifts with the world, but also something that helps clear my mind, bring me to peace, bring me to safety, and connect with others in my community. And now, stepping into the ultra world, it's so different than anything I've ever experienced before. Being in the military or road running or even doing Ironmans is just such a different sport. There are so many different components that make you a really good ultra runner that might not correlate necessarily to like a 5K runner. Now my relationship with running and my level of running is to challenge myself in the sport and become a stellar athlete at what I'm doing. All of this to say, the first thing that I wish I knew as a new runner is that intention matters. Tip number 2 is to slow down the majority of your running. So staying in zone 2 or a lower heart rate zone than hitting it full blast for every single run is going to allow your body to build an aerobic base. When you have a strong aerobic base, you're able to go faster and further with putting less energy and less impact on your body. So the more that we build the aerobic base, the better that we'll be at long distance running and be able to maintain a faster speed for a longer period of time. One of the biggest differences between running now versus running in the military was the fact that in the military, we ran the majority of our runs at like zone 4. We were going balls to the wall for every single run. Every run was a competition. If you weren't spent and smoked by the end of each run, you weren't doing it right. So now we have a better understanding of what makes you a better runner, a faster runner, a more efficient runner. It's by aerobic base building. So slowing down the majority of our runs, following around the 80-20 rule of 80% zone 2 and 20% speed, conditioning, etc. If you weren't like completely dying and dead by the end of your run, did you really even try? It was definitely the mentality that everyone had in the military. And for me, because I'm ultra competitive, it was always a race between me and whoever else was in front. So I definitely took that really seriously and just thought the only way to get better at something would be to give 100% every time, right? In reality, a big part of becoming a better runner is aerobic base building. In order to get faster as a runner for longer periods of time, we have to build an aerobic base. The way that we do that is we slow down our runs. About 80% of our runs should be in a lower heart rate zone, and that's very particular for each individual runner. And it's something that you generally can sustain a conversation with that might be a little bit broken. So not 100%, like we can have full-on conversations, multiple paragraphs without breathing, but the majority of these runs should be generally pretty easy. Doing these zone 2 or aerobic runs is going to allow our body to actually recover faster. So going back to my military experience, doing 100% every single day doesn't allow your body to actually recover, and that actually degrades the quality of the 100% that you're actually able to give. So if we are in aerobic base building block, we're doing 80% slower runs, our body's actually able to recover from those runs a lot quicker, so we're able to do more volume over the course of several months, several weeks, or even over several years. So aerobic base building starts by doing slower runs for the majority of your runs each week. This brings us to the third thing that I wish that I knew as a new runner, and that is that by slowing down our runs, we're actually able to take our speed sessions much more seriously. So taking our speed sessions very, very hard and actually hitting your threshold paces and actually hitting zone 4, zone 5 even in your workouts and truly hitting high intensities is how we're going to make gains in our speed. So for me as an ultra runner and as a coach of people who are training for half marathons and marathons, I always recommend doing 1 to 2 speed sessions a week for these longer distance runners. Obviously for someone who's training for track specific workouts, for sprint distances, for even like a 5K, they're going to be doing a lot more speed throughout the week. But for these longer distances, that is definitely what I would recommend as someone who programs. So I do 1 speed session a week, maybe 2 speed sessions a week, depending on my volume, but I really hit these speed sessions hard. So after each individual push of speed, I'm also taking that recovery section very seriously. I remember when I used to think that I was doing speed, I would recover in a jog, and that wouldn't really give my body a full ability to actually recover in between my individual speed pushes, so I wasn't able to give 100%. So going back to the idea that if we don't fully recover, we're not actually able to give 100% in these speed pushes. So when able to hit high intensities, you have to hit high intensity recoveries as well. The fourth thing that I wish that I knew as a new runner is that comparison is the thief of joy. Something that I get asked all the time is, do you have Strava? And my quick answer is no, I don't have Strava. My longer answer is I do not have Strava because my training is very intimate to me, and the last thing that I want is judgment from others or comparison of myself to others, or the opposite of others to myself. So that's a choice that I make. I know a lot of quote unquote influencers in the running space love Strava and they post their Strava all the time. I'm just not that girl. It's just not something that I'm interested in, but a lot of that stems from this high pressure that I put on myself just to be excellent in general, but then having that be in my brain constantly, and then having the comparison of other people's paces, other people's distances, other people's weekly mileage, it just gets to be too much for me in my brain. So that's a personal choice that I make. As a new runner, it's super important to remember to not compare your day 1 to someone else's day 1000. When you're first starting out, start slow, be progressive about your build, and just truthfully build the consistency in the first couple months to even full years of your training program. Try really hard not to compare yourself to Olympians, to people who are running sub 3-hour marathons, to high elite performing ultra runners. Of course, you can gather inspiration, and I think that's what's so cool about being able to share my journey on this platform and on Instagram, is being able to inspire you to do what works best for you in your journey, but to try not to compare and constantly, wonder if your worth is just as much as someone else based on their performance and their statistics. So trying to kind of get out of your brain and remind yourself that this is your race, this is your pace, this is your training block, this is your journey of starting running, whatever it may be. This is your opportunity to show up for you, and it doesn't require the opinions or the comparisons of anyone else in your sphere. This one might ruffle some feathers. The 5th thing that I wish that I knew as a new runner is that if you hate the training process of training for a race, but you're signing up for a million races, you don't like running, you just like racing. And maybe that has something to do with your ego. I think there's a lot of pressure for a lot of people to sign up for as many races as they can, to show up on Instagram in some sort of way, or to show up with people in their daily life of hey, like I did this, that, and the other. But if you hate that training process to get to each and every start line and finish line, I would really question once again, going back to number 1, your intentions of why you're choosing to sign up for races and why you're choosing to run. Not everyone is going to love running, and that's totally okay. People might be great at running, but not truly love it. But if you are doing something and forcing your body to do something incredibly hard for the accolade that you're getting on Instagram, that's not going to be something that's going to be sustainable for you long term. Once again, it might ruffle some feathers, but the amount of races that you sign up for in a yearly basis does not determine your worth or your elite ability or your beginner ability, whatever it may be in your running journey. So once again, race your race, race your pace, show it for you. The 6th thing that I wish that I knew as a new runner is that lifting will increase your performance. You guys all know that I love lifting. It's something that makes me feel like an athlete, and it helps with my training block and my programming. But strength work for everyone as a runner will improve your performance, especially if you are lifting for a program or with a coach that's specifically catered to becoming a faster, better, stronger runner. So obviously, as a mountain athlete, as someone who is racing in the mountains, I need to lift to feel my strongest on the mountain on race day, but also just all of my training runs as well. Not only will lifting increase your performance on race day, it'll also decrease your injury rate. It'll help your body to become stronger in your running block. The philosophy on lifting has changed a lot. Obviously, like 20 years ago, the whole goal of runners were to be as small as possible, because what is most efficient for longer runs, we used to hear, is the smallest, the leanest, the lightest. That was always what we were recommended as professionals in the athletic field. That brings us right into the 7th thing that I wish that I knew as a new runner, and that is being smaller isn't a recipe for being a better runner. The definition of endurance is the ability to endure. So if by forcing our body to be significantly smaller, we are reducing our ability to endure, we are therefore creating a worse endurance athlete. So for me, I don't need to be incredibly tiny to be great at ultra running in the mountains. It's just not something that I feel like is conducive to my performance at all. And when we think about muscle maintenance, we think about longevity, and we think about how women are so much more prone to muscle loss over time, which then leads to bone loss over time. In order to be a healthy individual for long periods of time, we want to make sure that we're holding on to as much muscle as we can as we age, because that's going to help us live longer, healthier lives. And that's something that we all should want, whether we're runners or not. And my last note on this section is that running alone should not be a weight loss tool. Of course, moving more is going to be an ingredient for weight loss. In general, for weight loss, for everyone, you want to be in a calorie deficit. So in order to do that, we need to eat more and or move more. In the grand scheme of things, doing intense cardio for long periods of time, several days a week, is going to increase the hormone ghrelin, which increases your hunger levels. So therefore, you are more hungry than you were before when you were stationary. And if we're not learning lifestyle tools to be able to live a healthier lifestyle in general in our life, and we're only incorporating running as a weight loss tool, it's just not going to be effective. It's not something that's going to be sustainable for you. So if that is your goal, which I know there's not that many of you in my sphere, I feel like most of us are training for performance, but if you're coming here for a weight loss chat, this is the only thing I'm going to tell you, is just learn how to live a healthier lifestyle that's going to be maintainable for the longest period of time, which is your life. Eating whole foods, fueling your body for performance, and falling in love with exercise, whatever it may be, that's going to be your best tool for living a healthier lifestyle, not just incorporating 4 miles of running a day. And that perfectly segues us to my final point that I wish that I knew as a new runner, and that is food is fuel. This is something that I've talked about so much, and I just feel like a broken record at this point, but food is fuel, not only in our daily life, just eating as humans and as athletes, but also in our actual training session. I remember, several years ago, I would go hours into a run and not take a gel, not take any electrolytes. And I remember each and every run, I would get to mile 6 and I would hit this massive, massive crash. And it was like someone hit me with a bus. I would continue running, but it always felt significantly worse in those first 6 miles. And I know without a doubt that that comes from not fueling. You guys have seen me over the past several weeks. The training that I do on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, always includes the fueling strategy that I'm going to take into my races. I don't know what it is, but there's this weird idea that you only need to fuel during your races, and I just think that that's a recipe for GI distress, it's a recipe for disaster, because you have no idea what works for you and your body. So training the way that you race and fueling in all of your training is going to be able to allow you to recover better, push really hard during your sessions if it's a speed session, sustain the effort that you're doing for easier aerobic sessions, but also in general, it's going to help your gut get used to the food that you're consuming. That way on race day, you're actually able to fuel for your performance and actually be able to consume the calories that you are losing during your run. I know we talked a lot about food in this episode and what my fueling strategy is for Leadville 100, but just a reminder once again that my fueling strategy might not be something that works for you. You are your own person, and it's up to you to figure out what works best for you, your training, and you as an athlete in general. And that is going to wrap us up for this episode. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for watching another episode of Chasing Leadville 100. A reminder, if you are new to this channel and new to the series, to go back and watch the previous episodes. There are so many good ones sprinkled in there, so make sure to catch up on those. If you're interested in coaching one-on-one, there's a link down below. If you're interested in merch, there's a link down below. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help me out and allows me to make more videos like this. I cannot believe we are so close to race day, and I'm getting all the feels, all of the emotions, all of the goodness, but until next time, stay unbreakable.